Walk into almost any workplace, and you will likely see a blur of motion. People are rushing between stations, forklifts are moving pallets, and everyone looks incredibly busy. It looks like hard work. Yet at the end of the month, the profit margins are razor thin, and the customers are frustrated. We assume that a highly active floor naturally translates into a profitable business, but the reality is highly counterintuitive. Pushing your teams to move faster and produce more goods can actually drain your bank account. To understand why, we look to Japanese industrial engineer Taiichi Ono. He architected the Toyota production system, redefining how we measure human effort. Ono introduced a strict, uncompromising definition for what constitutes waste. He looked at operations purely through the lens of the customer. If a buyer is not willing to pay extra for a specific physical movement, internal process, or material, then that action is waste. Stripping away those non-value-adding actions became the blueprint for the most efficient and profitable assembly lines in the world. Profitability stalls when activity is misdirected. When a team's effort is high, but margins remain low, the barrier is typically the invisible, systemic waste hiding beneath the surface of daily business operations. Operations experts categorize these hidden drains on capital into 8 specific types, remembered by the acronym DOWNTIME. They hide in plain sight behind 3 very common business illusions. The first is the just-in-case illusion. A manager might run machines at maximum capacity to lower the cost per unit, causing massive overproduction. But creating a product before the customer actually wants it immediately generates excess inventory. That extra stock is not a protective buffer. Every unsold item turns into a solid block of ice, freezing your cash flow and hiding underlying supply chain failures under a physical mountain of safety stock. The second trap is the look busy illusion. This occurs when a poor floor plan requires the transportation of materials across a building or forces the wasted motion of employees constantly walking over to fetch the right tool. Because cycle times are deeply connected, when one person takes 30 seconds to walk and get a part, the next person in line is waiting. That brief idle time ripples down the workflow, creating severe bottlenecks. The third trap is the perfection illusion. This is extra processing, polishing a metal bracket that lives inside a sealed motor, or requiring 4 manager signatures for a basic supply request. You are burning labor hours on details the customer never asked for. When you waste time on useless details, you fall behind schedule, and when your team rushes to catch up, they create defects. You are now forced to pay for the raw materials and the labor all over again to fix a mistake that shouldn't have happened. But the ultimate sin, the 8th waste, is non-utilized talent. This is the failure to engage the creative, problem-solving capacity of your frontline employees, treating the very people who know the process best like mindless cogs. These 8 wastes operate as a cascading chain reaction. Overproduction demands extra storage, which requires unnecessary transportation, which leads to damaged goods. The waste feeds on itself, draining revenue at every step. We can see how this drains a company by looking at Siam Control Box, a manufacturer taking an agonizing 14 days to build a single electrical cabinet. Labor costs were high, and their margins were vanishing. An operational audit found the root causes immediately. Workers were walking miles across the compound every week just to fetch wire, a massive transportation waste. To save themselves the trip, they started hoarding spools at their desks, creating a localized inventory crisis. Back at the workbench, employees wasted motion digging through disorganized toolboxes. When they finally finished a step, they stood around waiting for quality inspectors to arrive. Meanwhile, manual wire stripping led to repeated defects and extra processing. Unfinished parts quietly stacked up. Management intervened by collapsing the geography of the work. They snapped the layout into a tight U-shaped cell, placing inspectors right next to assemblers. They hung tools on visual shadow boards for instant access. Most importantly, they actually asked the workers for ideas, leading to the purchase of an inexpensive automated wire stripper that eliminated the defects entirely. The production time for a single cabinet dropped from 14 days down to 3. Labor costs plummeted, and profitability returned almost overnight. Siam Control Box didn't install an expensive robotic workforce. They reached that 3-day production target simply by eliminating the physical distance and the wasted time between each step of their existing build. Lean management functions as a permanent change in how a business views its daily operations, extending far beyond a simple one-time organization project. You can test your own environment right now. Walk through your workspace and find the exact spots where physical materials or digital files are passively piling up. That pile is a bottleneck. It proves that someone downstream is waiting. Next, calculate the unnecessary physical steps your employees take daily. If a worker walks 2 miles a shift just to access a shared tool cart, your current layout is entirely broken. Then, check your output against your client's actual needs. You may be pouring resources into engineering a feature they don't even use. Finally, evaluate how you handle failure. If a defective part gets thrown in the trash without anyone tracking the root cause, or if an employee's suggestion is ignored, you are throwing away the exact data needed to fix your company. The greatest threat to your company's survival rarely comes from a competitor across the street. It comes from the accepted, invisible friction hiding inside your own walls. Once you learn to see the waste, you can systematically remove it.